Hi, this is Mike. Welcome back to the Moodle programming series. The goal of the series is to develop a custom Moodle block, of which we've created a number of custom blocks. They don't really do much other than just give examples of different aspects of block development, which really has been the whole goal of this series anyway. And in this session, what we'll talk about is global variables. We'll explore a little bit in the core API too. I've created another block, and I've called it globals. And I've added all the necessary files, the access, language file, the class file, the block underscore globals that extends block base, the version. And here we have a new file that literally is completely outside of the block. It's in a sense it's really outside of Moodle. It's just a link. The way it's viewed is just through a link, and just like anything on the web. We'll take a look at that. I think the best thing to do though is just to take a look at the site itself. Okay, we're logged in as the admin user. Here's the block here. It consists of, this is the body. We use a global variable to get the course ID, the full name of this particular course. The course and the site on the first page are the same thing, because the front page is actually a course. And then in addition to that, we've used the user global variable to get the user's ID and then the user's first and last name. So that's our body. And then down here we've got some links to that view page. And like I said, it's just a link. It's a path from the document root of our Moodle site, but it's just a link. There's no infrastructure with that page without us having to add it, and you'll see what I mean by that in just a few minutes. I did this just simply to demonstrate, a number of things, as you'll see, but also to display these global objects and their contents. So there's a site. It's an instance of the standard class, which is a dynamic class, and we'll discuss that as well. And here's the course. It is also an instance of the standard class. And if you look at the site and the course and the site, they're probably pretty close to being the same. Yeah, they're exactly the same. We also have user. This is also an instance of the standard class. And the page. The page is an interesting one in the fact that there's so much information in it. And I have not had taken a look at all the details of that, but there's obviously quite a bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at the source code. We'll start with the class file, our block class file. Here we have block underscore globals that extends the block base, and the block base is what gives us all of our functionality. Here we've defined the init function, and here we have get content is defined, and here we see a couple of those global variables. Now the keyword global is used to access a variable that's defined, declared and defined in the global context. The only other way to get access to that would be to pass it in as a parameter. Let's take a look at where these are, where they come from in the initialization of Moodle. So to do that, let's go to the index file, which is the first file that's accessed when you access a Moodle site, and this is where the initialization starts. The first thing that happens is that the logic checks for a config.php. If none is found, it actually redirects to the install.php. If the config.php file does exist, then it loads that file. So let's take a look at what's in that file. And here you have, we unset a config variable. I think this is kind of a misuse of the global keyword, but it's still global just because of the fact of where it's defined. It's not within the scope of a class or a function. We instantiate that variable with a class type of standard class. So this becomes an object of standard class, an instance of standard class. Standard class in PHP is a dynamic class type, I guess you could say. And with it, anything that you assign to it, any like here's an assignment of DB type with a string. So that becomes a part of this object. It's not defined ahead of time. It's done dynamically. As you need things, you just keep adding them to it. And here you can see that there's configuration for the database. And here's our site URL and our data root. Directory permissions. And then when all those things are assigned their values, then we include another file which is lib setup.php. Well, let's take a look at that. This is where the major part of the initialization of Moodle takes place. I mean, it's quite a long file, 1,000 lines, and there's just a ton of initialization going on in here. And part of that initialization is some of those global variables that we're going to use. So in this case, here's a global DB, database connection, used for all access to the database. There's a session global, Moodle's wrapper around PHP's superglobal of $_session. And the difference between a superglobal and a regular variable global is that a superglobal would have access without using this keyword. You could access it within anywhere in your application without using this keyword. And let's see what else we have here. User holds the user table record for the current user. Site is a front page course record. Page, a central store of information about the current page we are generating in response to the user's request. The current course, an alias for course, the property of the page object. Output is an instance of core renderer or one of its subclasses. Use it to generate HTML for output, and we'll see that in operation. Let's search and see where the assignment actually takes place for a couple of these. They're declared here. They're just declared. They have no value at this point. They don't have a reference to a class or anything. They're simply a placeholder. So let's look for, let's do output. So here, the output global, it's instantiated with a bootstrap underscore renderer object. Let's look at another one. Let's look at course. Okay, it's the assignment that takes place here. It gets a clone of the site. And here we have site right here. Here's where the assignment for site where it takes place. From the get site. And we could look and dig and keep digging, but that's not really the purpose here. The purpose here is just to give you a general idea of where these things come from, and a place that you can look if you have questions about them. So I don't think we need to really say any more about that. Back to our blocks class, and here we use we get the ID from the global course object, and also the full name. We get the ID from the global user object and the first and last name from the global user object, and we assign all those values to a text variable that we use down below here, and we just make that the body of our block, and that's what we've got right here. And then for the footer, we created some links Moodle style in this code here, and we'll divert a little bit here. Like, whenever you see something whenever I see something that I don't understand, there's two things I do, and one is I'll go to the Moodle site and go under development, and I'll look in the core APIs and just do some searching. So, I'm assuming that these are going to have something to do with, I'm not sure, but let's just guess with pager output. So there. So basically what I do is I simply, if I do get a hit, then I can start reading about what that object is, or whatever it is I'm looking for. In this case, it's a class of Moodle underscore URL that has two arguments to its constructor: a path, a relative path, and then an array that builds the query string. And that would be one place where I would look. And again, I would just search through it and just read all I could about that. I might even check in the output and do the same thing. Search, yeah, there's some hits. And just read and learn. The other thing that you can do is just like we did with the source code. I have a local copy of Moodle. What I'll do is I'll just find in files whatever it is I'm looking for, and I guess in this case we are looking for a class, so we'll do the Moodle underscore URL and see what we can find out about it. It just adds a little different angle or slant than the documentation does sometimes. Not always, it's not a for sure thing. But any little bits of information that you can gather from the source code or from the documentation is going to just add to your own knowledge. One thing about the source code that's really nice is that you can see exactly what they're doing. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to read the logic, but a lot of times it's pretty clear exactly what they're doing. So we finally got a hit, and let's just go ahead and click on it. Let's just take a real quick look here. And class Moodle underscore URL. Class for creating and manipulating URLs. I mean, we kind of knew that. It can be used in Moodle pages where config.php has been included without any further includes. But you can see then what member variables it has. Also constructor, and then any functions that would follow. This is another way of just drilling down and trying to learn something if you don't know. And just to continue, here we've built these URLs using this Moodle underscore URL. Takes two arguments, a relative path, and then an array of the bills to query string. I've added a element here to identify which link we're calling and then are accessing. And then down here there's a switch that actually handles that, and we'll talk about that. We'll just get to that in just a minute. But that's passed in as a query string into the view. Next, we take these object instances of Moodle underscore URL, and we actually create the links using this HTML, a static function of this HTML underscore writer, and you can tell it's static by the two colons. And we could search, we could do the same thing here. We could look for this class in the source code, or go back to the API and do the same thing. And this makes up this section here, the links that we have in our block. Let's take a look at our view, go through it. Let's do from the bottom up. Since we have a standalone file, it's necessary to add the Moodle infrastructure to it. Two of the things that we do here is we add a footer through the output, global, and we add a header. And then anything in between that is what gets displayed on the page. This becomes our body. Next, we have the breadcrumb. That's this little bit of this code snippet. And I literally just found that an example of a breadcrumb and then just made the modifications to where it fit with the different, like the string and the path, the two strings and the path. And just, I think I found on one of the advanced blocks tutorial. And then that, in terms of our page, gives us this. Then the heading is simply we use the sites global variable, the full name of the global variable site. And then we just set a page layout of standard, and there's numerous page layouts that you can, again, search in the documentation. This required param, it actually cleans these variables based on the query string variables based on this parameter type that's passed in as an argument. If we modify if we change the name, if it expects course ID and doesn't get it, in this case, if it expects course I and we pass in course ID, then let's see what happens. We should get an error. Yeah, there's an error. A required parameter course I was missing. To find out more, go ahead and do some searching on the APIs. There's, in addition to this method of cleaning is recommended. Actually, let's go ahead and just look at that on the site. Let's go to, just to give you an idea where it's at. There's a required param, and then there's also an optional param. There's a third one called clean param. It's actually called within both of the optional and the required param. Yeah, let's search for required. Required login, there, required param. Don't trust any input from users. Use Moodle forms whenever possible with an appropriate set type method call for each field. If not using a Moodle form, clean input using optional underscore param or required underscore param with the appropriate param type. Do not access get or post or request directly. And that's exactly what we've done here. We've actually included a param type using the required param and including like if we're expecting an integer, then we want to use that param type integer. And up here we just want to make sure this is being called from Moodle. And in order to get access to the globals, we needed to have the configuration file called. So, that's quite a bit for just one little topic. Could discuss it a lot more, but I think that'll give you a little bit of a feel for globals. Maybe a couple ideas on how to do some searching if you don't know exactly what or how to use something by going to the API or going to the source code. I think we'll wrap it up right there for now, and thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.